Welcome to Agency Bytes, a podcast for agency owners, hosted by agency veteran and coach Steve Guberman. Agency Bytes is a podcast focused on delivering actionable agency information from agency experts in about 25 minutes. Why 25 minutes? Because who has the attention span for much more these days? And you can squeeze in a listen between meetings with time for a bathroom break or coffee refill before your next meeting.
Welcome to Agency Bytes, a podcast dedicated to helping agency owners thrive. I'm Steve Guberman from Agency Outsight, where I coach creative entrepreneurs to build the business of their dreams. Today, my guest is Bondi. She's a communications catalyst, speaker, and the author of Ask Like an Auctioneer. I don't know why I stumbled on that. Ask Like an Auctioneer. I love that. How to ask for more and get it. She coaches VC-backed founders, executives, and professionals to speak powerfully in high-stakes situations. Dia helped the Rio de Janeiro secure the 2016 Olympics and has guided leaders in winning hundreds of millions in decisions and resources. Her TEDx talk, selected as a TED editor's pick, highlights how the right ask can change everything. Super exciting. I love it. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a wacky idea that hit me over the head, the idea of asking like an auctioneer.
So where does this come from? Like, you're not an auctioneer. You're not in Texas or the Midwest. What's the backstory here?
I am an auctioneer.
How? Where? When? I don't get it.
Exactly.
Tell me, what is it?
Okay,
What's the story?
So I have been in and around leadership communications for 2 decades. I took a break and I put myself on sabbatical. And in that year, I did like the artist's way, end to end, I got a couple of, I was able to, I achieved a pull-up, I just like worked on stuff. And in that time, I made good on a threat that I had made at a dinner table a few years before, after being invited to be the live fundraising auctioneer for my kids' preschool fundraiser. And that threat was, you know what I would do sometime? I would actually learn how to auctioneer. Like, that was fun. Like, just as a bucket list. Yes. And when I was on my sabbatical, my husband was like, I get this antsy thing where I want to go learn something weird that's way outside of my domain just to like get out of my own rut. Mm-hmm. And he was like, oh, maybe maybe you go do that now. And so I got on an airplane and I went to auctioneering school.
There's an auctioneering school?
There is.
Honest to God, I just thought it was like cowboys that grew up talking. I don't like.
You're right. You're actually You're correct. So when I got to auctioneering school, it was literally like me and 100 cowboys.
Amazing. Okay.
And we spent like that week learning how to auctioneer just about anything. It's sort of, it's numbers, it's bid calling and numbers, and it's closing the bids. And so we were, it was like, we had discussions about differences between art auctions and cattle auctions and fundraising auctions and, and garage sale, or like box lots, what they call box lots, where literally you're auctioneering something that starts at $1, mm-hmm. like a random box of stuff. And when I was done with that, I was like, okay, what am I going to do with this? And so when I got back to the Bay Area, I started doing fundraising auctioneering for women-led nonprofits and nonprofits benefiting women and girls. In my world of communications work, I'm very interested in elevating and accelerating women in the workplace and in entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I'm going to put on a gown and do this as what I think of as an impact hobby. It's this weird little hobby. It's this weird little hobby that I had that kind of had like, I wanted to put more money and resources in the hands of women who were running nonprofits and folks, all, kinds of folks that were running nonprofits that benefit women and girls. So fine. So 30 auctions into it, I was like, wait, what I'm learning here is super useful for how I think about helping my clients tell better stories and make better asks. I mean, you're in and around the agency world. Your clients are pitching work all the time. Those are essentially mm-hmm. asks and they're call to actions, right? That's where the stories that I work with people on every day always starts with like, what is it that you want from your audience? So anyway, it just hit me like a lightning bolt that I wanted to teach other folks what I was learning at the front of the room, but not in order for them to be auctioneers, just so they could apply what I was learning in their startups, in their small businesses, in even for leaders and ambitious professionals inside of organizations that need to make asks of their own leadership in their organization to resource the projects that they run, the initiatives that they are in charge of, et cetera. And I was like, okay, but I'm not going to stand up an auctioneering school for girls. Like, that's not what I'm doing. Right. I don't want people to be auctioneers. I just want people to ask like an auctioneer, because it hit me like, wait, we've been doing this wrong forever. So I launched this. I tested it with an audience, what I mean by asking like an auctioneer. I got invited to talk to a group in Silicon Valley about something about, I don't know, personal branding or something. And I was like, that's not really my lane, but I do have this weird idea I need to validate with an audience. Can I do this thing called asking like an auctioneer? And the woman was like, yes. So I put it in front of 60 women for 20 minutes. And I told them, like, your job is to tell me if this is garbage or not.
Okay.
And at the end of the 20 minutes, they were like, please keep going. And it's now a book and a workshop and a keynote. And yeah, there it is.
So you had this lightning bolt moment. You're on
Yeah.
the stage. You're auctioning off God knows what to help this not-for-profit, which is an awesome thing. I love that for any cause. So what was that connection between talking fast and getting bids and raising paddles to, like, what was
Yeah.
that connection?
It's nothing to do with talking fast. So everybody
Okay.
can relax. I'm not asking you to,
Well, obviously, listen, if I'm in a pitch session as a client or as an agency, I'm not going to hand out paddles, but
Yep.
there was a connection there between what you were doing as, let's say, the agency or the VC or the whatever, right? And what the audience was doing as the client or the investors or the, right? So those were the different roles that were being played. What was the connection?
So in my thousands of coaching sessions I've done over the years, when I work with somebody, I have to ask, like, okay, what is it you're asking for from your audience? And whether you're an agency owner or you're an individual that is, making a request of your boss, like, it's kind of the same thing plays out.
Right.
And that is, what is it that you're asking for? And once I know what that is, it's headcount, it's budget, it's scope of work, it's whatever the thing is. I don't know, you're asking for some partnership that's got a value of $5,000, or you're asking for an investment for 25 million. Like, there's a thing, and I have to ask, how much of that thing are you asking for? Like, how big is it? Because how big it is changes the story a little bit. And for a lot of years, I was met with the question, okay, well, Dio, I don't know. Let me think about it. I mean, they know, but they like question themselves. And then they're like, well, what do you think I can get, Dia? Here's the situation. What do you think I can get? And I'm like, great question. For years, I was like, that's an amazing question. So we kind of design our asks based on what we thought we could get. And that sounds like, oh, this client, this customer, this investor, this board member, this boss, this executive, this budget, whatever, like, they'll never go for, I have to build a team of 7. They'll never go for 7. So I'm going to ask for 4, and then I'm going to borrow from an engineering, and then I'm going to take some discretionary funding. I'm going to piece it together. Or, they'll never, I'm just going to use I know that folks who are listening are agency owners, but maybe you had a salaried role before. You're like, I really want to, like, I want to, by this time next year, I want to be 20% bump in my income, well, maybe that applies to an agency owner that's putting themselves on payroll. You're like, well, but they'll never go for a 20% increase. So I'm going to ask for 7%, or I'm going to ask for 12%, and I'll settle for 7. So we design these asks based on what we think we can get. And that is basically designing your ask in order to get a yes. And then we go make it. And then when we get what we asked for, we feel amazing. But what I realize is that's not at all what we do as auctioneers.
Okay. I have a question, but I feel like you're going to answer it, so I'm going to wait.
Okay,
but
cool.
It's about mindset. And so what I'm hearing you say is,
yes,
I want 20%, but I'm not worth it, or my self-confidence or self-esteem or track record is not going to let me win it. I'm going to start lower, as opposed to, I want 20, I'm going to start at 30.
Beautiful.
Is that where you're going with this?
Yes. So what we do is exactly. You're so on it. And so much of this is mindset. And I have a name for the reason why we don't do this. I'm going to give it to you in a second. And for those who are listening. So we design an ask based on a yes. We go make the ask, we get it. But that's not what we do as auctioneers. As auctioneers, we go like this. I'm looking for a certain amount for this painting or whatever. I get a yes, and then I ask for more, and I ask for more, and I ask for more, and I ask for more. And I can't actually sell it until I get a no. I can't actually sell it until I say, I've got somebody with their paddle up at $5,000. I'm asking for $5,500. I've got 2 people in the room. I'm looking for, somebody's got it at 5,000, I'm looking for 5,500. Somebody says, I'm out at 5,500. I can't. Nobody in the room is saying yes. I've got heads are shaking of all the main bidders. And I'm like, great. I just touched the word no, which lets me know I've maximized the potential of the ask. And then I settle for a number beneath it. That's what I mean by asking like an auctioneer. actively pursuing a no and seeing that as a sign that you've maximized the potential of that ask, having some joy and relief that like, there it is. Like that's actually what the most is. That's what is possible. That's the most that is possible. And then settle for an amount or level of engagement. It's not always about money. Like I talk about money as a metaphor that is a little bit beneath that. And the idea there is that when we do that, when we actively pursue getting rejected, we end up designing an ask that is bigger than we would have if we had aimed for a yes. And we end up very often with more than we would have if we had designed for a yes. Right. So that's what I mean. It has nothing to do with speaking fast. It has to do with like reframing the no, not as like an existential threat, but as like, oh, there it is, touch the ceiling, and then have a conversation.
Hit the limit.
Yes, hit the limit.
I don't know where it comes from. There's the mindset of go for no, and I don't know if that's something you're familiar with. I don't remember where I've heard that, but it's been something that's kind of been ingrained in me as the sales guy for whatever it is I'm doing biz dev for. Is how far can I push this? What's the perceived value of it, and kind of understanding my audience. Is
so what you're talking about? What you're talking about as perceived value is spot on. So what I realized in auctioneering is that everything we would plan out what we thought something was going to go for. And the beauty of auctioneering is like this teeny tiny ask and response that happens within a minute and a half. So you can see what usually plays out in business over multiple weeks. You see it happen in 90 seconds, you know?
So you had like a behind the scenes thing. Guys, what do you like behind the curtain? What do you guys think this painting will go for? And you would like kind of have like internal little competitions?
You before you do a live auction. So I have done art auctions before you do it for fundraisers, not for Christie's and, large art, commercial art auctions. But we do plan out. What is it that we think this piece of art is going to go for? What is the bidding that we're going to start at? And what is our reserve, which is what's the minimum that we'd accept in the room? So if we're going to open the bid at $5,000, we know our minimum is going to be $6,500 and we think it's going to sell for $10,000. And let me just tell you, it very rarely plays out that way. It never goes the way we think it's going to go, which points to your idea of like the perceived value. We're not very accurate at assessing what somebody else values and how they value it. And so what we end up doing is basing our ask based on what we think something is valued at. We end up like shopping from our own wallets. And too often we 100% like undermine ourselves.
Yeah.
Now, to your point around mindset, so every time in my leadership communications work, like I've estimated I've done probably, 11,000 private coaching sessions. I'm an old bat now. I'm an old bat now. I started when I was very young, and now, I was 26 in this world, and now I'm 50, and it's just made a lot of room, a lot of opportunities for me to have a lot of private and group coaching conversations. And like there's a thing when we pump up the ask to something that feels like, oh, it might get rejected. Yeah. There's a feeling that comes up. And when I was asking myself, okay, that's what I want people to do. I want to think about people asking like an auctioneer, like actively going for a rejection and seeing that no as a piece of good news, This is a piece of good news because it's lets you've maximized the potential. But why don't we do that? Why don't we ask for more than we're like pretty much sure we're going to get? It doesn't have to be 100% guaranteed, but we all have, folks listening, you might just gauge for yourself, like how sure do you need to be before you go make that ask? I mean, it feels embarrassing unless I'm like 80% sure they're going to say yes. I feel that weird feeling in my stomach. That's what I call the zone of freaking out, or the ZOFO. Like the ZOFO is the thing that makes us not ask for more than we're pretty sure we're going to get, because it tells us all kinds of nasty stuff. Who do you think you are? You're going to ruin it. This is your only shot. You're going to break this relationship. Who do you think you are? You're out of your mind. I literally have people in my workshop say, like, if I ask big, how do I know I'm not crazy? Because it's a crazy feeling. Mm-hmm. It kind of feels like a Hail Mary moment,
Yeah.
So in auctioneering, I also have that feeling. I stand in front of a room I don't know, and I'm like, who's in tonight at $50,000? Do I have a paddle at 50,000? And a lot of times I do not. I am actively getting told no by 400 people in a room while I stand, in a gown with a mic strapped to my head. And my willingness to do that, like, has a direct correlation to what kind of funds we raise that night. So I have to like think about things that help me make a Zofo ask, make me do it anyway, even though it feels super Zofo-ish. And so I learned like 9 things I kind of extracted from my time auctioneering as this impact hobby that can help you have the mindset that says, yes, it feels Zofo-ish. I'm going to push send anyway. Yeah.
So how do you align that mindset of you in front of a room where you want to get the most money for this not-for-profit, but you're not on the hook? Your job, your team are not on the line if you don't clear $1 million or whatever, to an agency owner who's out there hunting and selling and pitching for, they're battling with the mindset of, man, can I get 20? It's really worth 40. I'm afraid to ask for 30.
So I'll say that for folks listening, like I eat my own dog food. I do this myself constantly.
Mm-hmm.
I have a very small business, right? As an author, I'm a professional speaker. I'm sort of a hired gun, like I'm a one woman show, and me and the woman that runs operations for me, like we sit down and scrum about this all the time. Of course, I have basic, I would call it like my pricing strategy for my private coaching and for my workshops. And here's what it is to bring me on site for a day. I just got done spending 2 days prepping a bunch of executives for Dreamforce, which is basically CES for Salesforce.
Yep.
And, I have my rate card, so to speak, but there's always strategic projects that are highly subjective. I would imagine folks who are listening or your clients, they have like, oh, if we're going to run a campaign for you of this scope, sort of here's the band that we live in our pricing card. But there's always these like unique situations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm applying this all the time to like really assess what is it that is the work, the job to be done here? What is the outcome and the impact? What kind of relationship do I have right here? What do I think it's rated at? And then I have to ask myself, what do I think will be rejected? What do I think is too much? Not all the time. Look, not every ask is one where you're asking like an auctioneer. But
what are the? Go ahead.
I think. Well, great question. What do you think they might be? I recognize.
I guess there are scenarios where it works and applies, and scenarios where it doesn't, and there are certain scenarios where it doesn't, where it's just kind of a straight math thing where you're not trying to push the envelope.
Yes.
It's a very black and white transactional thing.
Correct.
But I've been in a ton of pitches where it's like, listen, I'm going into this thinking I can ask for X, but I feel like I can get twice that. I'm just going to ask for it. You know what I mean? And go for that no. I've been more successful than not in those kinds of scenarios.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing to notice. And I think what you're pointing to is like, you have to kind of pick your moments, right? And depending on the stage that you're in, and my great friend Karen, she said her mom used to always say to her, well, if you can afford it, they'd be like, we're going to go to the mall all day and it's finals week. Well, if you can afford it. So you do have to consider, if you can afford it. So there are some moments where it's not the time to lay it all on the line in that way. But sometimes actually when the stakes are really high, that's exactly the time to lay it all on the line. And only you can decide based on the context, based on the client situation that might elevate the value of what you bring right now, because things are different today than they were for that client last year. I started doing one really considerable ask I made. Maybe it was 4 years ago. I made a decision. I work with a lot of founders who are VC backed, who are looking to exit. They're going to sell. They're going to exit through an IPO. They're going to have a liquidity event. And I'm, often their sort of secret right-hand person. I'm putting together the stories, whether they're fundraising or they're still doing founder-led sales. Like, I'm helping them find their voice and lead with it in their space. And I have never participated in the upside of their businesses. It's always been, right? It's always been, okay, here's the scope of the engagement we'll do together. Here's the rate for it. And it's cash and cash only. And a couple of years ago, I was like, Dia, what are you doing? Mm-hmm. And so I had a Zofo moment and I went, no, this next 10 years for me in my practice is going to be about adding ownership, which means getting on cap tables. It means participating in the upside of these founders that I, with generosity and heart and grit and guts, help, be successful. And I was leaving myself out.
Hmm.
And so I made an ask, it was maybe 6 years ago, of a blockchain company and said, here's the scope. I'm going to work with two co-founders and then one of their leads. I'm going to look for, here's the total scope of it. And I want it half cash. And I kind of threw up in my own throat. And I said, and I want it half in tokens.
And they said,
and I nearly paid off my house.
look at that.
So I made a choice. I was like looking for that opportunity to go, where can I bring ownership into? And I've done 4 other deals like that. My goal this next couple of years is to have 10 like that. Half of them aren't going to go.
Yeah.
Half of them aren't going to go. But it doesn't matter. It's about what goal I have right now. And then what asks can I make that help advance that goal? So I think only you as an agency owner can decide that when.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does it help? And you mentioned, so pre-auction, you say, all right, this piece of art, we know what the minimum is that we'll accept for it.
Mm-hmm.
We know what we're
call
starting
that the reserve.
it at. Mm-hmm. The reserve. Yeah. I bought my house from auction, by the way, so I'm a little familiar. Yeah.
Cool.
It was pretty freaking exciting.
It is.
Do you think that going into, again, thinking from an agency pitch standpoint?
Sure.
All right. So I know the value of this website for my team is 20 grand, and that includes already profit and covering my costs.
Yep.
But I think I can get more, and knowing the reserve, my minimum is 20. The way that I would frame it is, if you go in at 30 and they say no, but we can do it for 25, you still have to take something off the table. And is that kind of...
Do you though?
Well, yeah, because there's value in the, let's say, 5 grand you're taking off the price tag. Otherwise, you're just kind of giving it away, even though it's all fluff at that point.
Great. So I guess you might have to decide what the things are that help grow the volume, or sort of the density of the ask or the off. So let's talk about this. Mm-hmm. All right. So what you're pointing to is what I like to think of as like one component of the offer inside the ask. So my ask is, this is a 30 grand project, and the offer is, you get, this talent working on this campaign, developing this set of pages that are aimed at having this kind of impact and outcome. Plus, we're going to write a white paper about you. Plus, we're going to run a creative strategy session with your team. Plus, we're going to do, I don't know, like, what are the things that make that $30,000 make sense that you then can peel away with? If you need to reduce that rate, if you need to say, okay, fine, we'll do it for 25, that don't hurt the core promise of the campaign or the project, but feel like nice to have. So I think that's the trick is, and I say this in the book, and I want to remind everyone that this is not about manipulation. You have to come at this with like honesty and generosity, and like, it's not about like, what garbage can I add into this proposal that makes it possible for me to build a rationale around making the biggest ask and really fleece my client. That's not what we're after. No. But I mean, I'm sure, Steve, and folks who are listening, you've given yourself raises before. And sometimes it's just because it's time to give myself a raise.
Yeah. I'm glad you clarified that. It is not about manipulating and fleecing and what can I get out of people.
No.
Yeah, I think there's a big difference there.
It can't be extractive. And so when I think about what is the offer inside of the ask, this is one of the 9 insights I got from the auctioneering stage. Because I had to learn to stand on stage and be like, okay, I'm going to ask this room, full of folks who are here to support this organization for that money. I got to ask. My job here is to ask for that money. But I'm like, that feels so gross when I don't, like, I need a story, And in the story it can't just be like describing what this organization does. They already know what the organization does. They wouldn't have bought the friggin' ticket to the gala if they didn't,
Yeah, they know they are there to support the fill in the blank. Yeah.
Right. And so my job in the setup, it can't be too long into the setup, is to look for the real offer inside of the ask, which, let's just take an example, like, I do an art auction I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. I do an art auction every year for a studio here that does arts education for schools here, but also has artists in residence programs, and they do printmaking. They do all kinds of amazing things. They've been here for 50 years. Yeah, they're lovely, wonderful. We nub each other. And I had to get really clear that when I stand up and introduce myself to this room to help them contribute tonight, to also understand that they get something too. What is that?
Mm-hmm.
And not for like a tit for tat kind of way, but like, look, maybe tonight is the night where you, for the first time, will get to say you're a collector. Tonight is the night you get to come here not a collector and leave here with your first piece and you can call yourself a collector. Maybe tonight is the night where you get to have the experience of saying out loud after tonight that you have made a contribution and you are living out loud in alignment with your values. Maybe tonight being participating in a collective act of generosity with a community of people who share your values has, matters to you. Like, it's kind of my job to put that together,
Yeah.
So as folks, and I know that we're talking about agencies, but also you might be looking at partnerships. You might looking at deepening your relationship with an existing ongoing retained client. Like, understand what matters to them. And sure, all the metrics matter. Level of engagement, market penetration, I don't know what like selling assets, like the things that you're building for them that help them do their job. But then the individual you're working for, are they somebody who loves being first? And do you have a crazy idea of something that you want to do with them to help them reach their goals, and that creative leader inside that organization, maybe you're the AOR for them, like to help that person advance their own career by getting to be a pioneer in this new particular approach to a creative strategy you're doing or something. I don't know if that was a word salad, but you see what I'm going for? Like, it's the actual person. What is the offer for them inside of the ask you're making? I need another 50 grand. I want to do this. We think that there's this extra project we think are really going to push over the line. It allows you to reach your goals in your business, but also allows you to elevate your visibility in the organization as a creative leader here. Do you hear that?
Yeah, there's so much value in that, so much impact in that, and that can go so far. Yeah.
And then I think your ask, if you can get to the heart of that, it can help you step into your Zofo, because it's not, the big ask you're making isn't coming from a place of being extractive.
Right.
It's coming from a place of like, hey babe, I see you. And in that way, like, I have a little 3-part framework you can use for setting things up. You want it?
Do it real quick, and then we'll jump into rapid fire. Go ahead.
This is about a 3-part setup for these kinds of asks, which is, I see you. I see what you're trying to do. I see what matters to you. I see what's important to you. I see who you are. I see what your values are. You see me. Let me show you what really matters to me, what I'm working on, what matters to me, and how that, and because of that is the 3rd step, which is, because of the intersection of what matters, I see matters to you, and what I'm working on, here's my ask. And when we can do that, we set that ask from that place of like mutual benefit.
I love that. I see you, and here's what I see in you, and here's what you see in me, and here's that intersection. And yeah, that's massive. I want to. Yeah, it's in the book. We're gonna push that book out.
I hope so. Yeah.
So real quick, random rapid fire questions. I love to just kind of throw out the answers to which can be anything that makes you happy. What's something that you can't get enough of these days that you're binging, whether it's a show, a hobby, a book, a podcast, or whatever?
Rest.
What does rest look like for you?
Sitting in my courtyard. I live in a sort of a single story, flat roof, mid-century courtyard type of house, sitting in the courtyard and staring at my koi fish.
Beautiful. What is a tool that you recently integrated into your life? It can be anything from a kitchen gadget to a who knows what piece of software, not AI though, that you look back and you think, how did I live without this thing before?
It's tough. I'm not much of a thing person.
Okay.
Yeah. How did I not live with this thing before? Sure. Okay, here's one. Adidas makes a free hiker running shoe that is it's like a high top suction up to your ankle running shoe, and literally don't know what I did without it before. Like, that is my go-to running and backpacking shoe.
It suctions up to your ankle?
Yeah, it's like a it's a running shoe, but it has a lot of elastic fabric that kind of sucks up because I roll my ankles all the time, and I love to downhill. When I run with my friends, they smoke me. They're way ahead of me, but I smoke them on the downhill, and it's not uncommon that they come upon me completely face down in the dirt. So these Adidas Free Hikers, I don't think I've crashed since I started wearing them.
Amazing. All right, so they give you solid ankle support.
They do.
I love it. And then in addition to the past 29 minutes of invaluable business advice, what is a final piece of invaluable business nugget that you can share with listeners?
If you have a dream for yourself, make the people that are around you aware of that dream. Let your dreams be known, because we can't help you, and we can't respond to the asks that you might make unless we really get a sense of where you're going.
I love that. And I think you need to own it out loud. And absolutely, I fully support that. So listeners, go to your nearest bookstore, the online bookstore, get yourself a copy of Ask Like an Auctioneer, How to Ask for More and Get It. You can support Dia in her dream of not being a best-selling author, but of getting this information out to everybody who needs it.
It's true.
And increase what your asks are. So Dia, thank you so much for joining me and for all that you shared with our listeners today.
Thanks for having me. Go ask for more and get it, everyone. You got this.
Love it.
Thanks again for tuning in to Agency Bytes. If you know someone with expert knowledge on a topic that agency owners would love to hear about, go to agencyoutsight.com/podcast-guest and nominate them.